Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly session titled Latest in Bitcoin Tech, where we cover the Bitcoin Optech newsletter. And this week we will go through newsletter 329, published on 15th of November 2024. This week's newsletter has two news articles. Both of them are research oriented, and then one release candidate and two Bitcoin core PRs and one LDK PR and one LND PR. Let's see how much will we be able to cover within the new time span. I will commence with the preface of the newsletter. This week's newsletter summarizes a new off-chain payment resolution protocol and links to papers about potential IP-layer tracking and censorship of LN payments. Also included are announcements of new releases and release candidates, including security critical updates for BTC Pay server and descriptions of notable changes to popular Bitcoin infrastructure software. Okay, let's read the first news article. And like both of these news articles, like I just hinted that they are research-based news articles, and within the purview of this session, it will obviously not be possible for us to go into the intricate details of these proposals and cover them in a comprehensive manner. You need a lot of time to do that because these ideas and these proposals are generally byproducts of months and months of research. But we'll try and summarize it and make as much of it as we can, at least on the surface level. And whoever wants to understand them in detail, then probably the resources are available on the website, and you can go and dig deep into it if it interests you. But we'll try and cover as much as we can on the surface to get a broader idea of what the person or the mind behind this proposal is trying to achieve. MAD-based off-chain payment resolution protocol. John Law posted to Delving Bitcoin the description of a micropayment protocol that requires both participants to contribute funds to a bond that can be effectively destroyed at any time by either participant. This creates an incentive for both parties to appease the other or risk mutually assured destruction, MAD, of the bonded funds. So MAD here stands for mutually assured destruction. This differs from the ideal of a trustless protocol where only the party at fault loses funds in the case of a protocol breach. However, in practice, deployed trustless protocols like LN often require the confirming party to pay on-chain transaction fees to recover their funds from a breach. Law uses this fact to argue for some of the benefits of a MAD-based protocol. So before we get into what the proposer proposes as the advantages of this protocol. Broadly, this basically is an off-chain protocol, like we have the Lightning Network, right? And other than the Lightning Network as well, the ones that are active, the ones that are proposed are like Arc and like Liquid, etc. Right? We have multiple off-chain payment protocols. This is one such idea, which uh, which slightly differs with the Lightning Network and has some similarities from the Lightning Network. All right. So in Lightning Network, generally it's one person who funds the Lightning channel. It is one person who funds the Lightning channel. But in this protocol, like both the parties will fund the Lightning channel. Both participants contribute to funds to a bond. Both participants to contribute funds to a bond. All right. Also, in the Lightning channel, there is game theory in play. Like you can't. I mean, if you are acting by the rules of the Lightning Network, then you are always the winner. It's like the Lightning Network is architectured in such a manner that the cheater, if he gets caught, loses it all. And the person who plays by the rule, who's honest, will never be deprived of his share of the funds, right? So we have this concept of revoked commitment transactions. So in a Lightning Network, if one of the parties is trying to broadcast a revoked commitment transaction and the other party catches them while they are cheating, then the party that is honest gets all the funds in the Lightning channel, right? And the party that was trying to cheat is punished by being deprived of all of their funds, right? So in the Lightning channel, there is no incentive for the person to cheat. If they cheat and they get away with it, then it's different. But if they cheat and they get caught, then they are deprived of all of their funds. That is how Lightning Network has been architectured. Slightly differently, this particular proposal there is a possibility that the honest person might end up losing their funds as well. How we'll see in the future, right? So if somebody's trying to cheat, out of the two people, if one is trying to cheat and the other party even catches them cheating or knows that they are cheating, there is still a possibility that they might end up losing their funds. So this game theory is not at its optimal in this proposal. And you see how that happens. So law uses this fact to argue for some of the benefits of a MAD-based protocol. In the case of destruction of funds, it uses much less blockchain space than trustless contract enforcement, improving scalability, right? So in case of the destruction of funds, it uses much less blockchain space than trustless contract enforcement, improving scalability. So this protocol takes like it occupies less space on the blockchain. It occupies less space on the blockchain. We'll see how that is. Being based on counterparty appeasement rather than global consensus, the MAT-based protocol can enforce expiries as short as a fraction of a second rather than a minimum of at least several blocks. Log is the example of guaranteed payment resolution, success or failure, in less than 10 seconds compared to LN currently needing up to 2 weeks in the worst case to settle a payment, right? So in the Lightning Network, we have HTLCs, right? And if you are hopping a payment via multiple nodes, then each node or each participant in the hop has a time lock, right? And within that time lock or within that time span, they have to fulfill that HTLC. Now that time span can vary in accordance with what the participants in the Lightning channel have agreed upon. They might be as long as 2 weeks, right? So you might have to wait for a payment for 2 weeks. And even if you broadcast your transaction, in case of a non-mutual exit from the Lightning channel, if you broadcast the final state of the channel, there is again a time lock on that. You might have to wait for a few weeks to get your funds. Where this protocol differs is that the payments are settled within seconds. So to fulfill the HTLC, you are given a time frame of seconds. All right, I'll repeat this. Being based on counterparty appeasement rather than global consensus, the MAT-based protocol can enforce expiries as short as a fraction of a second rather than a minimum of at least several blocks. Law gives the example of guaranteed payment resolution, success or failure in less than 10 seconds compared to LN currently needing up to 2 weeks in the worst case to settle a payment. So, on the Lightning Network to settle payment, in a worst case, it might take 2 weeks for your time locks to get expired, right? But this specific MAD-based OPR protocol that we are talking about, in this, the HTLCs will expire in a few seconds. So you don't have to wait for weeks. In the case of a prolonged communication failure between two counterparties, the MAC-based protocol doesn't require either party to put any data on chain, and both parties are incentivized not to do so, as they will lose their portion of the bond deposit. In a protocol like LN penalty, pending HTLCs in a channel must be settled on chain by a deadline if communication breaks down, right? So basically, the person who is trying, like in the Lightning Network, if somebody is trying to broadcast a revoke commitment transaction and they manage to succeed, then they will they will be able to keep all the funds that they intend to keep with them. So if they broadcast the first state, the initial state, and it gets confirmed on the blockchain, then they keep all the funds in the on the Lightning channel, right? But in this specific MAT-based protocol, that doesn't happen, right? That doesn't happen. How we'll see that in the future? Even if somebody is broadcasting an old state, they will still end up losing some of their funds. So they'll end up depriving their counterparty of funds, but at the same time, they will also end up losing some of their funds. Law emphasizes that this can make OPR much more efficient inside a channel factory, timeout tree, or nested structure that would ideally keep the nested portions off chain. We've discussed what channel factories and timeout trees are, I think, in a couple of weeks ago. So Matt Morehouse replied that appeasement can logically lead to flow theft. For example, Mallory claims Bob failed at an operation that's worth 5% of the bond, paying Mallory 5% is better than losing his 50% of the bond. So he acquiesces. Mallory repeats. This problem is made worse by the inability to prove fault in typical communication networks. If Mallory and Bob lose contact for long enough for a failure to occur, they may each blame the other, resulting in Morehouse additionally notes that OPR requires reserving more user funds for the bond deposits, which may degrade user experience. Users today are already confused about multiple channel reserve that prevents them from spending more than 99% of the channel balance. So this is a counter argument that is presented by one of the developers that probably went through the proposal. Okay, one of which was that uh, this protocol is based on appeasement. This protocol is based on appeasement. So if Bob and Mallory have a channel and Mallory claims that Bob failed at an operation that's worth 5%, right? So Mallory claims that Bob did not pay her 5% of the entire funds in the channel, right? Bob owes her 5% of the funds in the channel, and Bob isn't sure he failed. But paying Mallory 5% is better than losing 50% of the bond. All right. So if Mallory broadcasts the current state of the network, Bob will end up losing 50% of the funds. Bob will end up losing 50% of the funds. So Bob has two options: either to pay 5% of the funds to Mallory, or to refuse to pay 5% of the funds to Mallory. In which case, if Mallory broadcasts the final state of the transaction, then Bob will lose 50%. That is his entire share. All right. So here, this is like game theory. As I said, is not at its optimal. It's not always optimal, right? Because both the participants at the start of the channel creation have to put their funds in a third UTX. So basically, like we have the funding transaction in the Lightning Network, right? We also have a funding transaction in this proposal, and in this proposal, the funding transaction has three outputs. One output, for instance, pays to Bob, the other output pays to Mallory, and the third output is known as the burn output, or which is also known as the bond, where both the participants put 50% of their funds. Okay. And if the payment goes through successfully, then from that third UTXO, they are refunded their amount, right? So in a case of a dispute, if any of the participants broadcast that transaction, then the other participant will lose 50% of their funds, right? So in such a situation, somebody can exploit, like Mallory can exploit Bob by saying that I want 5% of your funds. And if you don't do that, I will broadcast this transaction on the mainnet, and you will end up losing 50% that you have parked in the bond or in the bond transaction. Okay, let's read this proposal. It's very long. I'll try and read the relevant parts of it. All right, cool. So the security of all-knowing Lightning payment protocol breaks down when the incremental cost of resolving a payment on chain exceeds the value of the payment, right? So the primary reason why we have the Lightning network is to make micropayments, right? Bitcoin is a settlement layer. It does not scale exponentially, right? Bitcoin is not designed for you to pay for coffees and breads and to pay tips to cab drivers, right? We need layer 2 solutions to do that, and Lightning Network is the most successful and the most popular layer 2 solution that does that. But even the Lightning Network has its limitations, right? It cannot be used for micropayments, because even on the Lightning Network, you need to have a funding transaction and a commitment transaction, right? If you are paying a minuscule amount of money to a restaurateur or to a cab driver, it is not worth it, because you might have to pay more fee in creating commitment transaction and creating a funding transaction, then you actually are going to make the payment, right? So even the Lightning Network, when it comes to making micropayments, it does not scale well. If you want to pay somebody $2, $5, right, and you don't have a Lightning channel with them, you want to establish a Lightning channel with them, it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale because the cost of creating a funding transaction and a commitment transaction will be much more than the cost of making a minuscule or a micro payment on the Lightning network. So that's what the author is trying to say. The security of all knowing Lightning payment protocols breaks down when the incremental cost of resolving a payment on chain exceeds the value of the payment, right? So what's the incremental cost of resolving a payment on chain? The fee that you have to pay to the miners for the funding transaction and the commitment transaction, right? If you have to pay a small amount of money to someone over the Lightning network, the amount of fee that you will have to pay to the miner for the funding and the commitment transaction will end up being higher than the amount of funds that you will transfer over the Lightning network. So for micropayments, small micropayments or one-time micropayments, even the Lightning network does not scale well. For example, if Alice uses the current Lightning protocol to offer an HTLC to Bob, and Bob fulfills the HTLC by providing the required hash image before expiry, Alice is supposed to update the channel state off chain to reflect the payment of the HTLC to Bob. However, if Alice fails to do so, Bob's only recourse is to put an HTLC success transaction on chain. If the cost of putting the HTLC success transaction on chain exceeds the value of the payment, resolving the HTLC on chain is more costly for Bob than allowing Alice to claim the payment, right? So if Alice and Bob have a lightning channel with each other and uh, uh, Alice and Bob fulfills the HTLC by providing the required hash payment, right? Okay, so Alice has to make a payment to Bob. Alice has to make a payment to Bob, and Bob has to share the pre-image with Alice, right? To redeem those funds. Now, Bob shares the pre-image, but Alice is not available for whatever reason. Alice is not available for whatever reason. Alice is not responding. In this situation, we come across what we know as a forced closure, right? On the Lightning Network, we can have a mutually agreed closure, we can have a forced closure. In this situation, we'll have a forced closure because your counterparty is not responding. So if you want to gain access to your share of the funds, you have no alternative except to go on the main chain. All right. And if you go on the main chain, if it's a small amount, if it's a very small amount, if Bob is a cab driver or something, and Alice is paying Bob a small amount, Bob shares the pre-image, but then Alice responds. Alice does not respond. Alice's node does not respond. In that situation, if Bob wants to avail his share of the funds on the Lightning Network, Bob will have to go on chain, and Bob will have to pay more probably to the miners in getting the commitment transaction confirmed than the funds that Alice owes Bob. So this is an example or an illustration of what was covered above, right? Therefore, Alice is incentivized to violate the protocol by not giving the payments funds to Bob's chain as she will receive those funds unless Bob acts against his immediate self-interest. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry. All right. Cool. So this is the drawback of the Lightning Network that the author has highlighted. This post presents a new Lightning payment resolution protocol called the Off-Chain Payment Resolution (OPR) protocol that has the following properties. Okay, so these are the properties of this proposal that the author has come up with. All payments are resolved correctly, provided both parties are self-interested and able to implement the protocol regardless of how small the payment is. All payments are resolved within seconds. This we discussed some time ago as well, right? So the HTLCs have to be honored within seconds, unlike the Lightning Network where the HTLCs might take several blocks or in worst case even weeks to get confirmed. Like the time locks are at times they vary from a few blocks to maybe even a couple of weeks. But this protocol is being proposed to be designed in a manner that the HTLCs have to be honored within seconds. There is never a need for a party to go on chain to resolve a payment, thus greatly improving scalability. And the fourth point is casual users can send and receive payments without having a watchtower service. Without having a watchtower service. Now, why do you need a watchtower service? In the Lightning Network, you need that for what we call as LN penalty, right? So if somebody is broadcasting a revoked commitment transaction and older state, you need to have a node that is constantly watching the blockchain, scouring for a revoked commitment transaction. And the moment they find a revoked commitment transaction, they can penalize the cheater, right? But here we don't have the concept of a revoked commitment transaction, so you do not have the overheads of maintaining a watchtower service. As a result, the OPR protocol appears to be well suited to supporting small everyday Lightning payments. In addition, the OPR protocol can be used for large payments either directly or by dividing the large payment into many smaller ones. The OPR protocol has weaker security than a trust-free protocol in which one cannot lose funds if they follow the protocol, right? This is hinting towards the Lightning Network. If you are honest and if you have a watchtower service or you have a node that is constantly scouring for cheaters, then there is no possibility of you being cheated, right? In the Lightning Network, the game theory is deployed in a manner that the cheater loses it all, and if you're playing by the rules of the Lightning Network, you win it all. But here, this is this is not an absolutely trustless protocol. Here, trust is not optimal, and this protocol is designed in a manner that even if you're honest and even if you know your counterparty is cheating you, there is a possibility of you still ending up losing funds. The OPR protocol is a griefer penalized protocol as an honest party can be made to lose certain funds by a dishonest channel partner who grieves them. However, the griefer also has to lose a comparable amount of funds. As a result, an honest party who only creates channels with self-interested parties will never be subject to a griefing attack. So, in the Lightning Network, how does it happen? If a cheater cheats and manages to escape, cheater gets it all, and the honest participant loses it all. But if the cheater tries to cheat and gets caught, then the cheater loses it all, and the honest participant gains it all. Here, how does it happen? Here, if the cheater tries to cheat, and even if they're caught, the honest person will end up losing, and the cheater will also end up losing. So whoever, like, if any of the two participants decide to go rogue and decide to cheat the other participant, they can do that. But at the end, they will also end up harming themselves, right? So this is a mechanism that this protocol deploys as probably its implementation of game theory. So if Alice and Bob have a channel and Alice tries to cheat Bob, Alice can cheat Bob, but at the same time, Alice will also end up losing her funds. Alice will also end up losing her funds. So as a cheater in this protocol, you can harm, you can cause harm to the counterparty, but not escape unscathed. Even you will be harmed, even your funds will be lost. In the Lightning Network, it's generally one person taking it all. If the cheater cheats and they succeed, they take it all. If they get caught, they lose it all. Right? But here, if any person tries to circumvent the rules, tries to bypass the rules, try to cheat, they can do that. They can harm the other participant, but at the same time, they will also end up losing their funds. All right, now let's try and understand the security protocol a little deeper. Let's try and give it 10 more minutes and then we'll move on to other stuff because it's too long. We'll try and pick and choose relevant sections and try and understand it on the surface level. So, what's the security of the current Lightning protocol? All right. So, this passage probably highlights the current Lightning protocol. As noted above, with the current Lightning protocol, an offeree is the recipient, by the way. Okay, I'm not very impressed with the usage of this word offeree. Very rarely people use it. So an offeree is a recipient, okay, in the Lightning channel or in this protocol, in the context of this protocol, there's an offerer who's the payer, and there is an offeree who's the recipient. As noted above, with the current Lightning protocol, an offeree of an HTLC may be forced to put an HTLC success transaction on chain. The HTLC success transaction requires about 702 virtual bytes, and the additional input in the transaction that spends HTLC success transactions output requires about 316 virtual bytes for a total of about 1018 incremental virtual bytes to claim a payment on chain. So if you want to post close the Lightning channel, then bare minimum that you will have to pay is for this much 1018 virtual bytes. Assuming 50K for BTC, assuming that the price of Bitcoin is 50,000 US dollars, and the historically common fee rates of 10 sat per virtual byte to 100 sat per virtual byte, the incremental cost for claiming a payment on chain is in the range of $5 to $50, right? So if you have to force close a Lightning network, let's assume that the price of Bitcoin currently is 50,000 US dollars. And if you want to force close a Lightning channel, the fee generally historically varies between this range 10 sat per virtual bytes to 100 sat per virtual bytes. If the fee is 10 sat for virtual bytes, and you will have to pay $5 to get your transaction mined. And if it's 100 sat per virtual bytes, then you have to pay approximately $50. So if you have a minor payment to claim on the Lightning network, $2, $2.5, $5, right? Something like that. You will have to pay anywhere between $5 to $50 to claim your share of funds on the Lightning network, right? So if your counterparty on the Lightning network cheats you, okay, and you want to settle the final status of the Lightning channel on chain, you will have to pay a fee in the range of $5 to $50. So if the amount of funds that you are owed on the Lightning network are less than $5, then you probably end up paying more in fee than what you owe. And that's why if it's in case of micropayments, settling your Lightning channel, post closing your Lightning channel on the main chain, at times might lead to you losing more funds than gaining funds. Okay, so this is just a drawback of the Lightning network, drawback or a limitation or an edge case or whatever you can call it, or a trade-off of the Lightning network. All right. So now let's discuss a little about what this protocol is about. The OPR protocol operates in conjunction with the channel protocol that creates a series of signed off-chain transactions reflecting the current channel state, right? So this is pretty similar to the Lightning Network up till now, no difference, right? Even in the Lightning Network, we have pre-signed transactions, right? Your commitment transaction is always a pre-signed transaction. Old channel states can be replaced by new channel state via revocation key as in the current Lightning protocol or a per commitment key as in the tunable penalty or fully factory optimized protocol. The details of how to maintain the channel state are presented in the paper. So this is also the same, all right, as the Lightning Network. Even in the Lightning Network, we have a revocation key and we revoke all states, right? So if Alice and Bob have a Lightning channel and Alice has 1 Bitcoin on her side, Bob has zero. Alice transfers 0.1 Bitcoin on her side. Then the status or the state of the Lightning channel is updated and the old state is revoked. The old state is revoked. Even this new protocol works in the same mechanism that every single time there is an update in the status of the channel, then the old state is revoked and the new chain is and the new status is signed by both the parties, not broadcasted but signed. So pre-sign means that you have signed them before broadcasting them, right? Like you've not broadcasted, but you've signed them. So when the channel is created, this is very important. When the channel is created, each party gets signed transactions with three outputs, one of which pays to each party, with the third one being a burn output. The burn output pays to anyone after a 20-year delay. So the burn output will be claimed by a miner 20 years in the future. Each party must contribute a fixed amount called base funds to the burnout, right? So when the channel is created in the Lightning Network, how do we create a channel? We create a channel using a funding transaction, which is a transaction that is paid from a 2 of 2 multi-sig account with two outputs, obviously, like, okay, which has two outputs, excluding the fee. But here we have three outputs. Here we have three outputs. One output belongs to one participant, another output belongs to another participant, and we have a third output which is known as a burn output, which is known as a burn output. What is specific or relevant about this burn output? The burn output pays to anyone after a 20-year delay. Okay, so nobody can claim that burn output till 20 years. Nobody can claim that burn output till 20 years, right? Like basically incentivizes both the parties to act honestly. If they don't act honestly, then their share in the burn output will not be claimed for the next 20 years. They will end up burning their outputs and they will not be able to claim those outputs for 20 years, right? So this is like a bond or whatever, what's that word? An escrow account or a bond, whatever you want to say, where both the participants put their funds, and if they act honestly, then they can recover their funds, that they can redeem their funds, and if they act dishonestly, then they will not get their funds back from the burn output, and they will not have access to it for the next 20 years. So that is what incentivizes them to play honest, right? So the creation transaction has what? It has three outputs, one for one participant each, and the third is the burn output, right? And if both the participants act honestly, they get their funds back from the burn output. And if they try to cheat, then the they will not have access to their funds for the next 20 years. And that is what incentivizes them to act honest. So in order to route a new payment, an HTLC is created for the amount of the payment plus routing fees. Each party gets new channel state transactions where the value of each HTLC is moved from the offerer's output to the burn output. In addition, each party adds a fixed fraction of the value of the HTLC called matching funds to the burn output. Okay. So what happens now? Let's assume Alice and Bob have a channel, and we're talking here about this MAD-based protocol. Alice and Bob have started a channel. They have made a creating transaction, right? They have made a creating transaction. Now Alice wants to pay to Bob. Alice wants to pay to Bob. So Alice will first transfer the amount of money that she wants to pay to Bob into the burn output. Along with that, Alice and Bob will also pay a fixed fraction. Alice and Bob will both pay a fixed fraction to the burn output. The burn output has the amount of money that the offeree owns, meaning the amount of money that Alice wants to pay Bob, that is in the burn output, and also both the parties have to pay a fixed fraction of the value of the HTLC. So let's say it's 10%. So if Alice wants to pay Bob, let's say half a Bitcoin, then 0.05 Bitcoin. I'm just giving vague numbers. If both of them settle at 10%, then 0.05 Bitcoin from Alice and 0.05 Bitcoin from Bob will also have to be put into this burn output. So zero point 0.5 Bitcoin that Alice wants to pay to Bob go into the burn output, and 0.05 more from Alice and 0.05 more from Bob. So now zero point 0.6 Bitcoin go into the burn output. And if any of the two participants cheat, then this burn output will get locked for 20 years and they will not have access to their funds. As in the current Lightning protocol, the HTLC pays to the offeree only if the offeree provides the offerer with a hash pre-image before the HTLC's expiry, right? And we've covered this in detail, right? So whoever wants to claim the funds that are locked in the HTLC and the Lightning Network has to produce a pre-image. Once they produce a pre-image, only then will the HTLC be unlocked and will they have access to their funds. And the same mechanism is also deployed in this protocol. However, the expiry is set at seconds in the future based on the party's HTLC expiry delta MSEC and min final expiry delta MSEC parameters. These parameters are set to provide enough time to resolve the HTLC off-chain by receiving an update, fulfill HTLC or update failed HTLC message. Signing updated channel state transactions and propagating the payment resolution into the upstream channel. These parameters also include buffers for communication and computation delays caused by unusually heavy traffic, but they do not include time for putting channel uh, state transactions on chain. Okay, so here in this MAC-based protocol, the HTLC expiry time is in seconds. Unlike the Lightning Network, where it is usually set to certain blocks, or in worst case scenarios, might even be a couple of weeks. But here, the HTLC expiry time is what? In seconds. So if you get cheated, or for some reason, if you want to settle the HTLC, you don't have to wait for weeks. You can get access to your funds within seconds. If an HTLC is resolved successfully before its expiry, the HTLC's funds are moved to the offeree's output and both parties matching funds for the HTLC are returned to them, right? So if Alice pays to Bob and Bob furnishes the pre-image and everybody is playing by the rules and everything is hunky and dory, what happens? The funds that we have in the burn output, whatever share of it the offeree deserve, in our case Bob, will be given to Bob, and whatever the fixed fraction amounts that both the participants have deposited in the burn output, they'll get it back. In our example, we took vague numbers of Alice paying Bob 0.5 BTC, which goes to the burn output, and Alice depositing 0.05 BTC in the burn output, and Bob depositing 0.05 BTC in the burn output. Now, if Alice makes the payment, Bob gives the pre-image and unlocks the HTLC, and Bob gains access to his funds, and everything goes through smoothly. Then what happens? Bob gets that 0.5 BTC from the burn output, and both the parties get the fixed deposit that they had put in the burn outputs back. All right, so their deposits come back to them, and the offeree gets the share that they owe after producing the pre-image. As long as both parties agree on whether the HTLC succeeded or failed, they will agree on the new channel state transactions that resolve the HTLC, and they will both get back their matching funds for the HTLC. Finally, both parties agree on the resolution of all HTLC and they want to close the channel, they can create a cooperative closed transaction that returns their base funds to them and eliminates the burnout. Okay. Burn outputs. Let's go through this. How much we have? We have a lot to cover. We can't go through it in detail. Let's cover a couple of other articles, a couple of other passages, and then summarize it. Bond funds. I think this will be fun. Yeah. Let's read bond funds and then we summarize it. Then we can go to the next news article and probably give it 10 minutes. There are three ways in which a party that follows the OPR protocol can be forced to burn funds, right? So just now we covered what burn funds are, right? The a funding transaction in this protocol has three outputs: one for Alice, one for Bob, and the third is known as a burn output, right? And when there is a change in the state, the funds that need to be transferred from Alice to Bob are put in the burn output along with a fixed deposit from both Alice and Bob, right? And if everything goes through smoothly, Alice deposits the fund, Bob furnishes the pre-image, Bob gains the fund, both the parties agree mutually and update the state of the channel. Then what happens? From the burn output, the share that the offeree or the recipient deserve goes to them, and the fixed deposits that have been put in the burn outputs go back to their rightful owners, right? But in certain situations, if things go south and if there is no mutual agreement between the participants, then the the funds that are parked in the burn output might get burned. Now, what could be some of those situations? Some of those situations are enlisted here. First, a dishonest channel partner can put channel state transactions with a burn output on chain. A dishonest channel partner can put channel state transactions with a burn output on chain in order to grieve their partner while also grieving themselves. In this case, the reaper loses at least their base and matching funds, which are set high enough to discourage most or all such griefing attacks. Specifically, if each party devotes a fraction M of the HTLC amount as matching funds, the griefer must lose at least M uh, divided by 1 plus M as many funds their partner loses and at least their base funds. Okay. One situation could be before the HTLC is settled, when the transactions are parked in the burn output, one of the two participants in the channel broadcasts it, goes on the mainnet, right? If they go on the mainnet in a state where the offeree's share of the payment is in the burn output and also the fixed deposits of both the participants are in the burn output, what happen? The burn output will get mined obviously on the blockchain, but nobody will have access to that burn output for the next 20 years, right? So if Alice decides to do that, what happens? Bob will be deprived of his share of funds, but Alice will also be deprived of her share of funds, right? So this is one of the griefing attack where you don't gain anything out of attacking. You just want to harm a counterparty, right? You like the attacker does not have any incentive, any monetary incentive in this. Bob will lose funds, but at the same time, Alice will also lose funds. So this is known as a griefing attack, where you are trying to harm your counterparty, but you're not going to have any monetary incentive in doing that. So this is one of the situations where you might end up burning your funds in context of this specific protocol. What could be the second situation? Second, if an honest party's channel partner completely fails and can't update the channel state for a very long time, the honest party can be forced to close the channel unilaterally by putting the channel state transactions with the burn output on chain. The amount of time an honest party is willing to wait is based on the likelihood of their partner becoming responsive versus the cost of the channel's capital and is independent of the length of the HTLC expiries. So in a case, your counterparty goes missing, does not respond, then in that situation, you might want to go on chain. And in that situation, also all the funds that are parked in the burn output will get burned, meaning nobody will have access to them for the next 20 years. So first situation is where somebody just wants to pull off a griefing attack. The second situation could be when one of the two participants go missing and are unresponsive. Third, both parties are honest, but they fail in such a way that they don't agree on the resolution of an HTLC. They will be forced to burn the HTLC funds, their base and matching funds. Fortunately, there are many techniques that reduce the likelihood of such failures. The third situation could just be a dispute. Could just be a dispute that both the partners do not mutually agree whether an HTLC was paid or was not paid, and they have a dispute and they decide to go main chain without resolving the dispute off chain. In that situation, all the funds that are parked in the burn output will get burned, right? So to summarize, basically, this proposal highlights a drawback or a limitation of the Lightning Network that it does not scale in case of micropayments. If you want to make non-custodial micropayments, if you want to set up a Lightning channel from scratch with a person, then in certain situations, the cost of creating, closing the Lightning channel might incur you more in fee than the amount of money that you will transact on the Lightning channel. And that is why this protocol proposes uh, a mechanism that will facilitate micropayments, on chain. And how will it facilitate it? Using time trees and channel factories, timeout trees and channel factories, right? So you'll have to first understand what timeout trees and channel factories are. For that, you can refer to Optech Newsletter 327, I assume maybe covered, right? And some differences between the Lightning Network and this specific protocol is that the HTLCs here have an expiry time of seconds in contrast to the Lightning Network, where they have a time that will vary from certain blocks, some blocks to maybe even 2 weeks. The other difference is that in the Lightning Network, we have a penalty mechanism. Here, we do not have a penalty mechanism. Here, we have an appeasement mechanism. In the Lightning Network, game theory is optimal and it's a trustless mechanism. Here, the game theory is not optimal. It's not completely trustless. Another difference is that in the Lightning channel, we have a 2 of 2 music account that runs the Lightning channel, where the outputs belong to the two participants. Here we have a third output as well, known as a burn output, where both the participants, every time they want to update the status of the channel, park the funds that are to be transacted over the layer 2 protocol along with a fixed deposit, and if they successfully update the status of the protocol, then the funds go from the burn output to their rightful recipients. And if they disagree, there could be three situations, at least three that have been enlisted here. Then in that situation, the burn output or the funds in the burn output get locked for 20 years and nobody can claim them for 20 years. So these are some differences or advantages that this proposal proposes to have over the Lightning Network. And if you want to go into further detail of it, then this is an entire light up situations in which the HTLC can fail, situation in which one of the counterparties can bully, situations pertaining scalability, pertaining usability, and with somebody. You can go through it, and if you have any questions, then maybe you can post, and I'll try my best to answer. But yeah, that is all that we can cover. Keeping into mind our time constraints before we move on to the next news article, which we will probably give 5 or 7 minutes to. If any questions pertaining what we've covered, I understand that we were not able to cover the entire depth and breadth of this article as understood. But still, I hope you have an overview of what this proposal is trying to achieve. So, what we were able to cover, not although not in its entirety, but what we were able to cover. If anybody has any questions pertaining to that, please feel free to go ahead and ask those questions before we move on to the next news article.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so he talked about the costs of when you have in a Lightning Network situation whereby there's a first channel closure, you pay more fee compared to this particular proposed protocol. My question is it not going to be, are they not going to use multi-sig to open those channels, or are they using snort signature? So I don't understand what particular difference that will make the fees to be lower.
Right. So for that, you will have to, like I said, understand what channel factories are and what timeout trees are. So just in case if you have missed, you can refer to Optech News at 327. Either read their article or you can listen to our weekly session as well, which is on Bitshala's YouTube channel. What happens in a timeout tree is that you don't have to go on the mainnet for settlement. You don't have to go on the mainnet for settlement. You can just transfer the funds of one channel to the other, one channel to the other. So there's a tree of lightning channels, right? And you don't have to set, you don't necessarily have to go on chain to settle that lightning channel. You just transfer the funds of that specific channel to some other some other lightning channel, right? So you can use timeout trees where there are multiple there are multiple basically branches. Just like we have a Merkle tree, we have a timeout tree where each leaf of a timeout tree is represented by a lightning channel. Okay, and if you close the lightning channel, if there's only one recipient of the lightning channel, then you don't have to go on chain. You can just switch that the funds from one lightning channel to the other lightning channel that you want. So this is generally in case of LSPs. Okay, this proposal is primarily for LSPs. So if you run a restaurant and you want to accept payment from hundreds and hundreds of what you say customers, okay, then you don't have to start and close a lightning channel with each and every customer, right? You have a fund with, you have a channel with the customer. When you're done transacting with that customer, you just transfer or route those funds into another channel with another customer. That's how timeout trees work, right? So timeout trees prevent you from going on chain. They prevent you from going on chain. You can look into what timeout trees are. They'll give you a better idea of how you can use the Lightning payment or any layer 2 protocol without having to go on main chain. All right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Cool. So we'll give this maximum 5 minutes and then probably 2 PRs that we'll cover. Okay. Papers about IP-layer censorship of LN payments. Shamin and Lolo posted to Delving Bitcoin summaries of two recent papers about reducing the privacy of LN payments and potentially censoring them. The papers note that metadata about TCP/IP packets containing LN protocol messages, such as the number of packets and the total amount of data, makes it relatively easy to guess what type of payload those messages contain. Example, in UHDLC. An attacker who controls a network used by several nodes may be able to observe the message hopping between nodes. If the attacker also controls one of those LN nodes, it will learn some information about the message being transmitted, example, payment amount, or that it's an onion message. This can be used to selectively prevent some payments from succeeding or even from failing quickly, preventing immediate retrying and potentially forcing channels to be closed on chain. Okay, so what this paper suggests is a possibility of people spying on the information that is routed over the Lightning Network. Okay, so the messages that are exchanged between the Lightning node are done over the TCP/IP layer. Okay, so it is possible. I mean, like even in Bitcoin, this is possible. Like we have heuristics, we have companies, or we have people, we have developers that possess expertise in heuristics. That they can look at the blockchain and they can relate pieces of information, right? They can relate pieces of information. They can trace transactions and figure out who those transactions belong to, or who's the recipient, or who's the sender, what's the use case, right? Likewise, we have people who can analyze packets of information that are transmitted over the TCP/IP layer and gauge what information is being broadcasted. Okay, either by the frequency of those packets that are being shared, or by the timestamps of the packets that are being shared, or by the size of the packets that are being shared. Right. So when two Lightning nodes are exchanging information with each other over the TCP/IP network, it is possible for an adversary who is monitoring the network to figure out what information is being processed or broadcasted between those two Lightning nodes, and thereby they can use information to censor the transactions. Right now, how can this happen? And this is not unique to the Lightning Network. Like such researches keep on coming every now and then pertaining to different protocols. How this can happen? This can basically be done by an automated system. What's an automated system? So basically, let's say there's an ISP provider, an internet service provider, okay, that controls a lot of IP addresses, okay, and that internet service provider knows what, uh, like it can observe if information is being shared by two Lightning nodes. So if there are two Lightning nodes that are communicating with different IP addresses, obviously, but both those IP addresses are controlled by one automated system, right? There's one service provider that is governing both of those IP addresses of both of those Lightning nodes. In that situation, it's possible for the person who controls that autonomous system, sorry, not automated, that autonomous system to monitor information, right? So if there's one internet service provider and there are two Lightning nodes that are availing services of that same internet service provider, when they send and receive information to each other, it's possible for that internet service provider to observe that information. To observe that information, they might not be able to decrypt it, but they know at least they can see packets. They can see what is the amount of data that is being shared, how much volume of data is being shared, what's the frequency of data that's being shared, right? So they can figure out certain informations. Is it small enough for us to read? No, it's too big. We can't read. Okay, so assuming the adversary is monitoring traffic exchange between to from one of the nodes, the basic steps they may follow can be summarized as follows. Identify TCP segments related to NN payments. Anything else besides such segments is not of interest relevance to the adversary. This is typically accomplished by identifying an update at HTLC message. Okay, so basically, this is update at HTLC message. This message is generally sent when you want to initiate a Lightning transaction. Okay, so this message can be figured out. So the automated service provider or the ISP provider can figure out that this message is, let's say, X bytes in volume. This message is X bytes in volume. So every time one Lightning node is sending a packet of information to another Lightning node that is of that X bytes in size, it is a hint that it could be an update at HTLC message, right? interfere with payment by dropping the first outgoing revoke and act message that is sent by the initiator. The specific message is not a requirement, but was selected due to its terminal position as it affords the attacker time to confirm that the payment is underway. Right? Revoke an act message is to update the status of the Lightning channel. So this is to initiate a payment. This is to revoke the old status and to update the new status or to acknowledge the new status. So somebody, an ISP service provider or an automated map service provider can monitor information that is being shared between two Lightning nodes and figure out by the frequency or the timestamps or the size of the packet of information that is being processed between the nodes. That, oh, now this Alice's node is sending an update at HTLC message to Bob's node, or Alice's node is now sending a revoke and act message to Bob's node, and they can censor those transactions, right? They can censor those transactions. They can drop every subsequent revoke and act message that will be transmitted by the initiator until the timeout eventually expires, right? So they can censor the revoke and act transaction. They can prevent the recipient's node for receiving this message till the HTLC expires, right? So it's possible for an adversary, an ISP service provider, or an automated map service provider to monitor information that is being provided, that is being shared or exchanged between two Lightning nodes over the TCP/IP protocol, thereby dropping, for instance, evoke and act message and preventing from the status of the Lightning channel from being updated till the HTLC expires, right? Which could lead to loss of funds, Now, what are the mitigations? The mitigation, one of them is padding. Okay, is padding. What is padding? Padding is basically to ensure that all the messages that are, for example, all the messages that are transferred between two Lightning nodes are of the same size, right? So you can't distinguish. Okay, so for instance, if an update and add HTLC message is of X bytes and revoke and act message is of Y bytes, the observer can figure out that, oh, a message of X bytes is being sent, so it could be an update and add HTLC message, or a message of Y bytes is being sent, so now it could be a revoke message. You make all the messages of the same size, right? So even if let's say update and add HTLC is of 10 bytes and revoke and act is of 20 bytes, you add the update add HTLC message with 10 bytes of garbage data. Okay, so all the messages look the same. All right, every message that is being broadcasted between two Lightning nodes look the same. They are of the same size. Okay, so it is not possible for an observer to distinguish one message from the other message. All right, the other mechanism could be encryption. The other mechanism could be delaying in sending messages. Okay, and sending and varying the frequency of sending messages so that nobody can use timestamps to determine when messages are being sent. All right, so this is what this research paper brings our attention towards, that it's possible for an adversary, an ISP service provider, or an automated map service provider to monitor the information that is being broadcasted between or sent between two Lightning nodes on the TCP/IP protocol, either by the frequency of that information, or by the timestamps of that information, or by the size of the packets that are being shared, and what are the mitigations and what are the ramifications of them. We just covered, right? Censorship could be a ramification of them. And what are the mitigations? The mitigations are padding, to pad and ensure that all the messages look similar, and to obfuscate the data, to encrypt the data, and to ensure that messages are not sent at regular frequencies, to send messages at random frequencies so that timestamps cannot be used to distinguish what information is being shared, right? This is broadly what this research paper brings our attention to, and whoever would like to delve deep into it can scout through the entire article, right? We're running out of time, so I'll just take 5 more minutes of your time and go through two PRs in brief, probably a couple of minutes for both the PRs. Bitcoin Core PR30592 removes the mempool full RBF setting option that allows user to disable full RBF and revert to opt-in RBF. Now that full RBF is widely adopted, there's no benefit to disabling it. So the option has been removed. Full RBF was recently enabled by default, so newsletter 315. So even we covered this newsletter. Full RBF was enabled by default in Bitcoin Core 28.0, right? Full RBF was initially disabled by default, then it was enabled by default. Now you cannot disable it. Like there's no option for you to switch it on, switch it off, right? Initially, it was off by default. If you wanted, you could enable it. Then in Bitcoin Core version 28.0, it was enabled by default. If you wanted to switch it off, you could do it manually. But now there is no provision for you to opt out. Bitcoin Core 28.0 onwards, or like if you're using any Bitcoin Core client or its fork that has merged this PR in production, then using like you don't have an option to opt out of full RBF, right? All your transactions by default will be full RBF and you cannot disable it. Okay, that's what this PR talks about. The final one that we'll cover is Bitcoin code PR30930 adds a peer service column to the net info command and an out only filter option to display only outgoing net connections. So net info, it's a command. It's a command that gives you information about your peers. Okay. So the new peer service column lists the services supported by each peer, including full blockchain data. So now when you issue this command, you'll get information pertaining your peers. What information? Whether they serve the full blockchain or not, whether they serve Bloom filters or no, whether they are compatible with Segwit or no, whether they have enabled compact filters or no, whether they can only provide limited blockchain data up to the last 288 blocks, and which they support version 2 P2P transport protocol, right? Version 2 P2P transport, what's that? Web 324, right? Encrypted messages. So now when you run this command, you will get all of this information about your peers and out only. Okay, so you can filter out only. You can use the filter out only, which will filter out your inbound peers and show you information only pertaining your outbound peers. Okay, all right. So that is what we had to cover in this week. We covered a research based on a MAC-based off-chain payment resolution protocol. We covered another research paper pertaining IP-layer censorship of LN payments and two Bitcoin Core PRs. All right. So just to commence, this week's newsletter, like I said at the admin as well, had two research-oriented proposals, all right, which obviously are not in the purview of our session, right? So we are not expected to cover everything pertaining these research-based proposals. They generally take months and months of research. Nor do I expect you to understand every bit of it. So please don't feel moralized. In fact, I congratulate if you were able to stick with us throughout the course of 60 minutes and were able to even get 10-15% of what was being talked about. It's generally the nature of these proposals are first that you need to sit with them, you need to hammer concepts in your head, and you need to spend hours and hours with these proposals and do a lot of back and forth to understand them. But yeah, we gather once in a week and we try and deduce as much sense as we can out of this proposal. So if you weren't able to follow everything, don't feel any more at all. Even if you understood 10-15%, that's great. And if any of these proposals excite you, you can spend some time understanding these things on your own. And don't excite you, and whatever you can understand from that, great. These are generally aimed towards researchers, research geeks, or people who are working on these protocols, right? And if you do not belong to any of those categories, then whatever you could understand will definitely make you a more learned Bitcoiner. And if you cannot understand, don't have the resources and the bandwidth to understand, no worries at all. That's all I had to share from my end. Any questions, anything to ask, please feel free, go ahead and do so. Else, feel free to drop off. I can remember the same proposal for PFP. Yes, yes. Like I said, this is very common. This problem is not common to the Lightning Network. It happens in the Lightning Network. It happens in on the main net. It happens like everywhere. Any information that you're sharing or with a peer on the TCP/IP protocol, your internet service provider, or your automated map system controller can monitor that information. And this is even common to the blockchain, like I said initially, right? There are heuristics company that are paid by governments to do just this, just monitor data on the blockchain and try and relate that data with people and use cases. So yeah, it's common. It's not specific to the Lightning Network. And thanks again. Good night. Nothing else from my end.